Before we start the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. And now, let's go. Story 1. People like to romanticize farm life. They picture sunsets and fresh cow's milk, dusty picturesque fields, and singing all day to cheerful work. But that's not the kind of story this is. This is the story of a scarecrow that was watching me. It began on an evening like any other, one of those nights where the silence felt too thick, like the land itself was holding its breath. I was aching from chores, my clothes damp with sweat and dirt, my brain fried from the heat and the usual arguments with Mom about homework. I slumped into a chair by the kitchen window with a plate of reheated stew and glanced outside. That's when I saw it. The scarecrow. It had always stood out in the lower field, crooked and slouched like it had given up scaring birds. But now I swear its arm had moved. Just barely. A twitch. A tilt. Then slowly and unnaturally, the limbs stretched sideways, revealing a rusted scythe clenched in its other hand. I stared, transfixed on it. The thing wasn't blowing in the wind because there was no wind. It was dead still outside, the kind of stillness that makes animals stop in their tracks and listen. Its head turned. Not swung, turned. Intentionally, like a man adjusting his neck after a long sleep. Its stitched grin pulled wider as its burlap face tightened, and for a moment, I felt it looking straight through the glass and into me. That terrifying sneer. I'd somehow seen it before. My breathing stopped, and a pressure built in my chest while a scream started forming just under my ribs. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, it was back to normal. It was just a regular scarecrow on the pole again. Sagging, quiet, pretending. I forced myself to eat, trying to shake off the feeling. But even in my room behind closed doors, I couldn't stop checking the window. I told myself it was my imagination. Stress, hunger, fatigue. But deep down, I didn't believe it. It felt too real to be my mind playing tricks on me. The rain came later, slow and steady. It smeared the glass and turned the outside world into a distorted abstract painting. Perhaps a Pollock piece. The trees swayed in the distance, branches contorting in the wind. The calves were bawling from the barn, anxious and loud, like they could sense something was out of place. Like they knew someone was out there with them. And then while gazing into the distance, something obscured my vision, a silhouette. Not on the pole. At my window, the scarecrow stood there, face pressed nearly flat against the pane, just inches from mine. It didn't tap. It didn't scratch. It just stared, a blank, motionless stare. Its lips curled in what could only be described as eagerness to be let in. I fell backwards, slamming my head into the wooden floor. The room spun like a grand carousel. When I managed to scramble back to my feet, I gasped there was nothing there. The rain still fell, but the window was almost dry. In the reflection, I could see my own face, and behind it, for a split second, a flash of black buttons where I shouldn't be. I checked on Mom, and she was in the lounge, her face wet with tears. "The paper never came," she said, trying to sound brave, but her voice cracked. She wasn't waiting for news about crops or the weather. She was waiting for word about him. My father. He'd gone to prison after what he did to her. Unspeakable and depraved atrocities that deserve the death penalty. I used to lie awake at night, imagining him getting what he deserved in prison. But now, I wasn't so sure. He's not coming back, I told her. You know that. Even though I'd lost confidence, I had to be strong for her. I had to protect her. Something in the dark was stirring, getting closer every passing second. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky still looked bruised. I walked out to the field, legs trembling, unsure if it was anger or fear holding me together. The scarecrow waited. I stopped a few meters away, staring into that blank burlap face, mustering up every bit of confidence I had. It had dried blood on the fabric. Old, sickly brown, crusted deep into the weave. "You're not real," I whispered. I stepped forward, seized it by the neck. "Move again, you brainless fuck," I taunted. "Do it." It moved, not suddenly, not with force, just with certainty. Its arms lifted slow but solid. The illusion of straw faded. Beneath its sleeves, human skin emerged. Not normal skin. Skin charred and warped, blackened like meat left on an open flame too long. Fingernails melted to the flesh. Snap bones protruded from split sinew. It grabbed my wrist with a strength that didn't belong to an inanimate sack of hay, and I couldn't pull away. Its face began to peel. The sackcloth unraveled, thread by thread, as if it was been shut to hide the unspeakable horrors that lay beneath. It was a man's face, or what was left of one. The skin hung in patches, lips fused into a permanent sneer. One eye was gone, and in the socket was just a black hole like an endless abyss of depravity. The other eye, still attached and very human, burned with recognition and malevolence. "Thomas," it rasped, a voice like a dying and feral animal, wheezing through collapsing lungs. "You look just like her." The hat blew off, revealing his skull, bare black veins still pulsing faintly across scorched tissue. He raised the scythe, and I didn't have time to scream before it came down. Metal sank into my shoulder with a wet, crackling crunch. Pain swallowed me whole. I felt the blade split through skin, muscle, bone. My blood poured into the dirt like a cascade. I screamed and squirmed until somehow, through blind panic and raw survival instinct, I managed to break free. I ran like the wind and didn't look back. I couldn't even if I wanted to. I bolted to the house, crimson blood dripping with every swift step. I slammed the door behind me, my shoulder burning like it was on fire. "Mom," I cried. She turned, pallid as if her soul had been sucked out. "The paper came," she stated weakly. Her hands trembled. There was a fire at the prison. My mouth was too dry to speak, as if my vocal cords had been ripped out. I nodded breathlessly in reply. "It happened 2 months ago," she whispered. "They don't know who survived and, more importantly, haven't found any of the escaped inmates." My legs went weak. "Was he on the list of deceased?" I inquired, the fear pervading within my voice. She didn't answer, but I already knew. "I think he's already here," I whispered. "Out there in the fields, waiting." We both turned to the window, in unison. The scarecrow was gone. Story 2. We never expected to find them, the family that went missing. The trails had all been combed over the past week and a half. And we were, after all, not experienced hikers ourselves. My sibling Ace and I had never really roughed it, never detoured from established trails. At least not intentionally. Somewhere in the pines, the official trail markings vanished. Our phones lost all signal, and the narrow track we followed wound upwards along the steady slope through the trees before finally petering out into nothing. We were about to turn back when we spotted, just ahead, a clear, smooth patch of land with the remnants of a stone circle for a campfire and some discarded soda cans. Ace grumbled and went to collect the cans, only to call out to me when they found a bright pink backpack. Inside was a notebook, a crumpled paper lunch bag, and a sloth plushie. "Found a snack for you." Ace tossed me the lunch bag. "Dude, that is foul." Catching the bag, I caught a whiff of the rot inside. Remnants of a sandwich, now stale and furry, and a mushy apple. I plucked out the mushy apple and flung it at my older sibling, who swore and ducked. Then together, we both examined the backpack. The same thought must have crossed both our minds then. What if the backpack belonged to the family that went missing? We'd strayed off the path. What if this was the same way they came? Only they got lost and never found their way back. According to the news, the family, parents Patty and Joel, their daughter Emily, and Patty's brother Mike, all went missing during what was meant to be an overnight backpacking trip. Witnesses saw them park their car at the trailhead and hike into the crisscrossing, well-worn trails of the pines. That was over a week ago. Now, I squeezed the sloth plushie, its fur matted from being cuddled so long. Could this have been the daughters? Ace flipped through the notebook, showed me a long-haired stick figure sketch of smelly Uncle Mike. We both smirked, but stopped smiling when flipping to the inside cover revealed a scrawled name, Emily B. Emily and her Uncle Mike. Those were the names, right? I said, chilled. "Shit, yeah." Ace turned to eye the woods around us. "We need to let the authorities know." The afternoon sunlight slanted down on us. There were no other traces of the family around the campsite. They'd clearly packed up and trekked on from here. But which direction? I scoped out the woods, wandering further out. Something pink fluttered in the distance. "Rowan, don't get lost." Ace called. I clambered up through the bramble and over dead leaves and snatched up the pink fabric, caught on a fallen trunk. It's a girl's sweater, I hollered. Nearby, a trail wound up the slope. Ace's lanky figure remained rooted far below for several moments. Then they riffled in their bag and wrapped some blue tape around a branch by the campsite. They disappeared further downwards, probably to mark where the trail we'd been following petered out. Finally, they clambered up to me. I stood, waving the pink fabric impatiently. "Don't go running off," began Ace. "Look," I turned the collar of the sweater inside out to show the tag, on which was written in Sharpie, Emily B. "It looks like there's a trail that goes up that way," I added, pointing along the slope. "That's not the way we came from, though." Ace squinted up the slope and then back toward the campsite. "We're way off track." They tore another piece of blue tape from the roll and added it to a branch nearby. "We have to find them," I began. "We could get just as lost as they are." "Ace, we can't abandon them. Rowan." Ace's eyebrows drew together. "We need to call this in. If we wander off into the woods, we might as well just put ourselves on the missing persons list." Back and forth we argued. I'm the rash and stubborn one. Ace is the analytical, equally stubborn one. Ever since we were kids, I was always the dreamer, ready to set sail on some grand adventure. On my wrist, I wore a bracelet reading, "All who wander are not lost," whereas my older sibling followed only carefully charted paths, believing only in hard facts, and never in airy possibilities. Today, the moment they suspected we were off trail, they'd started marking branches with their blue painter's tape and building piles of rocks alongside the path. After assessing the facts of the situation, they made their mind up, solid as bedrock. You'd move a mountain before you could move Ace. But you'd stop a bullet train before you could stop me, and I growled, "Think of Emily." I pointed into the woods. "She's out there, and she needs her sloth. And if we leave and lose all trace of that lost little girl forever, I will never forgive you." Hesitation on Ace's face. The sun was sinking lower in the afternoon sky, chills starting up my arms, the rays a burning orange that turned Ace's mop of brown hair into a golden halo but darkened their features so I could barely see their scowl. If we were going to find this family before nightfall, we had to start looking now. Ace made a frustrated sound in the back of their throat. Finally they swore, took out their roll of blue tape, and slammed it into my hand. "This is the stupidest thing you've ever done. But fine, you do what you're going to do, and I will go call it in and then come back for you. I'll follow your trail. If you get lost and starve out here and die, I will never, ever forgive you. Mark every fucking tree, Rowan. I will promise. I will." My sibling hugged me hard. Then they spun on their heel and left. "And for the record," they shouted over their shoulder, "you are a total moron." I flipped them the bird. Without even looking back to see this gesture, Ace was already raising their arm to flip me off in return. Then I turned and scoured the slope above. Asterisk there. Asterisk, it was right there, a well-trodden path, winding upwards. I marked it with the tape and started hiking. The temperature seemed to drop as I ascended, as if the air up here was thinner, colder. But the trail itself was wide and free of debris, the afternoon sunlight filtering through the pines and dappling the leaf-strewn trail. It was an easy, uneventful climb, so easy I nearly forgot to mark the trees. It seemed pointless with the path being so clear. I only put up the tape because I promised my sibling, making sure that each blue ribbon was an eyeshot of the last. I've been hiking for about 40 minutes when the path opened up suddenly in front of me, the slope leveling off, and there amidst the trees, in a small clear patch, there was a cabin. A pink thermos sat on the front steps. I rushed over and snatched it up. The surface was covered in stickers of anime characters. Emily's? But then a question entered my mind. Why isn't the cabin on our map? I knew it wasn't on the map because Ace had checked the map relentlessly the moment they realized we were off trail. Maybe it wasn't there because the map was too old, or because the cabin was privately owned, or maybe we'd strayed so far that both the path I'd hiked and this cabin were in an entirely different area. But none of that would explain why the missing family had found this cabin, entered, and remained missing still. They must still be inside. With that thought, dread ballooned inside me. If I opened the cabin door, what would I find? Suddenly, I very badly wished that my sibling were with me. I've always been the superstitious one who gets nervous about walking through graveyards at night. Ace never worries about flickering lights or haunted cemeteries or unknown horrors. Ace sees only electrical problems or soil filled with decaying organic matter. Their fears are always practical: unpaid bills, authoritarian laws, muggings, or violence. Never ghosts, curses, or whatever was waiting in that cabin. I glanced down at the plush sloth in my hand and back at the ajar door. The windows were cracked and dark. Grime caked the glass. The steps creaked as I reached for the door, and I felt my nose wrinkle and my stomach clench because of the smell. A terrible smell. It came wafting on the air, like garbage and sewage and meat left out to fester. An unbearable chill numbed my arm the moment I gripped the knob, and I braced myself and thrust the door open. To my surprise, not only was the cabin brightly lit, but several faces turned toward me. A thin, tired-looking man raised a hand to his lips for silence. "Why, are you Joel?" I asked. The man motioned to his lips again, more desperately. A woman at the seat across from him glared at me and shook her head. Her mouth had strange markings across her lips, like she'd drawn stitches over them. A little girl next to the woman looked at me anxiously, her eyes widening as she noticed the tattered sloth in my hand. The last person, a long-haired man seated next to the tired-looking man, did not turn around in his seat or move at all, and I could only see the back of his head. All four of them had their hands holding each other's on the table, except for the finger that Joel had raised to silence me. He motioned me to sit in the chair to his left. This was so strange. I had so many questions. I came over and pushed the sloth toward the little girl, saying as I sat down, "Are you Emily?" "People have been *SHHHH starred." Again the finger at his lips in a stern reprimand, and then the door to the cabin slammed open. I yelped, gasping as a hand gripped mine firmly. Joel had hold of my arm. He jerked me closer and pointed to himself, to his eyes, and closed them. I glanced at his wife, his daughter, already with their eyes squeezed shut. That was all the warning I had before I heard the footsteps, and I started to turn my head. His fingers dug into my arm. I squeezed my eyes closed. Something stepped inside through the open door. Asterisk thud. Thud. Asterisk the scuff of footsteps on the wooden slats. And the sound of chuckling. There was something vaguely familiar about the voice. I couldn't place it, but the longer I listened, the more familiar it seemed, like a word on the tip of my tongue, or a name I couldn't quite remember to a familiar face. The footsteps and the soft cackling drew closer. There was also something unpleasant with the footsteps. A smell, the waft of something rotten, or maybe a body odor. And then a whisper in my left ear, as if lips were just next to my skin. A cold, rotten breath. I think it whispered my name. The fingers on my arm tightened in warning. The whispering moved, now to my right ear. Asterisk thud. Thud. Asterisk the footsteps moved around the table. I almost opened my eyes to see who or what was in the cabin with us, but instinct told me not to look. The steps circled around the room, and then receded out the door, which clicked shut. The pressure on my hand eased, and I opened my eyes. The first thing I saw was four faces turned towards me, three of them anxious and worried. Joel, his wife Patty with her stitched lips. Oh God, were the stitches real? Their little daughter, Emily. But the fourth face, I gasped, and Joel's hand squeezed mine again, hard, reminding me not to speak or scream. Sitting next to Joel was the long-haired man who must have been Uncle Mike, in a worn jean jacket, recognizably the long-haired stick figure drawing from Emily's notebook. But where his eyes should have been were gaping, bloody sockets, and his mouth was also stitched with thick black thread. Joel tapped a finger on the table and pointed to the center. For the first time, I saw the words etched into the wood. Speak and be silenced. Look and be blinded. Leave and be bound. When the last chair is filled, you will be free. My gaze lifted again to Uncle Mike, and then passed across the faces of the other three, looking at me with anguish. I bolted upright, but Joel seized me, shaking his head fiercely. He jabbed a finger at Emily. At first I thought he was saying, "Don't you dare abandon my daughter," but then I realized he was pointing at her hands. She had not reached to pick up her sloth, despite having looked longingly toward it. Then I saw the little girl's frightened eyes drift from me to her hands. Her hand holding her mother's, and her other hand on the table. They weren't holding hands. Their hands were nailed to the table. Joel squeezed my arm again and mouthed the words, "Leave and be bound." All the air left my lungs. I collapsed back into my seat. The wheels of my mind ground to a halt with panic. Impossible was all I kept thinking. Asterisk impossible. Impossible. Asterisk terror numbed my brain, blocking all rational thought. Who was keeping them captive? Why? And why did their captors sound so familiar? Next to me, Joel still held a grip on my arm, but used his other arm to push the sloth to his daughter. She laid her head down on the plush fur. "Thank you," she mouthed to me. I nodded numbly. I couldn't speak, so I carefully freed my arm from Joel's grip and mouthed slowly. "Are there cameras? How is he watching you?" Confusion on Joel's face. I repeated the mouthed question, and then I started tracing out letters on the table. His gaze followed, and he nodded. In this painstaking way, we were able to have a conversation. "Me, who is he?" "Joel, we don't know." "Me, how long have you been here?" Joel and Patty shrugged. Tears from Emily, who only shook her head. "Me, does he always know if you try to leave?" More helpless shrugging. Joel eventually conveyed to me that Emily and Uncle Mike were the ones who spotted the path and found the way to the cabin. It looked dilapidated to Joel, but Emily and Uncle Mike thought they heard someone calling from inside, so the whole family entered. That's when they noticed the writing on the table. They were trying to decipher what it meant when it came inside. Uncle Mike had looked, and it had taken his eyes while he screamed at everyone else to run. Patty took Emily one way while Joel ran the other. Joel tried to lead their pursuer off, but he got lost in the woods. Patty and Emily somehow got turned around while fleeing and wound up back at the cabin with it on their heels. They tried to hide inside and barricade the door, but it forced the door open. By the time Joel returned to the cabin, he found his wife and daughter with their hands nailed to the table, his wife with her mouth sewn shut. Now, he traced out his message on the table with his finger while mouthing the words. "Joel, I can't leave them." I pointed to myself and mouthed words as I traced back. "You don't have to. I'll escape and get help." "Joel, but you would need a distraction to even get out of the cabin." "Me, can you distract it long enough for me to get clear?" Joel gave me a pained look. It was obvious he was afraid of bringing even more harm on himself and his family. "Me, I'll bring help. It's the only way to save Emily." Joel shook his head and sighed. But his wife, who could neither speak nor move her hands, stomped her foot and caught his eye. She gave a fierce nod. Emily looked at me with shining eyes. "Thank you for my sloth," mouthed the little girl. "Please save us." Joel exhaled and pressed his palms to his eyes. I didn't know if he was scared or just in despair. But he sat like that for a long time, and finally he turned his head to me and actually shouted, "Run!" His booming voice startled me out of my chair. Behind me, the door burst open. "Don't look," Joel added as he lunged past me, putting himself between me and the intruder, and I don't know if his eyes were open or not. All I know is he screamed, and Emily let out a sob, and I felt my way blindly to the wall and along it toward the door, even as that sinister chuckling passed right by my ear. Joel groaned, and there was a loud wham as he was slammed back into his seat, and then the thud, thud, thud of a hammer. Then I was outside, pulling the door shut behind me. I opened my eyes and bolted for the trees. The sky was deep purple, just enough light for me to see. How many hours had passed? How long ago had sun set? I ran down the slope and ran and ran and ran, not even caring which direction. All I thought was away. My legs and lungs burned as I flew down the slope and stumbled to a halt because in front of me was the cabin. Laughter sounded from inside. The door creaked open. Turning away, I sprinted back into the woods. By now I had a stitch in my side. This time I went upwards. I was still stumbling through the bracken when the chuckling, which had been behind me, was suddenly in front of me. No matter how many times I tried to go deeper into the woods, the laughter of that maddeningly familiar voice kept returning too close, hurting me back, and sometimes calling my name, "Rowawayan," and then I was at the cabin again, all the wind gone from my lungs, the voice whispering my name just behind me. No. I rushed inside and slammed the door shut. Joel's hands were nailed to the table. His eyes were squeezed shut. Patty and Emily looked at me in despair. I took my place quickly. Then the door burst open. Thud, thud, footsteps clunking fast after me, and then that rotten breath wafting into my ear, heavy and close, fingers squeezing into my shoulder. Panicked, flailing, I fought blindly against my assailant's grip. My fist connected with a smack against skin and bone, but the person, was unfazed, the grip tightening, stronger than ever, and the thing was laughing. Laughing in my ear. No. The scream tore from my throat. Raowan, its eerily familiar voice growled in my ear. It didn't sound human, and yet I knew its voice. Familiar the way a tune is familiar when you've forgotten the words. A tune like a lullaby. Like I'd known this thing from before I was even born. Let me go. I shrieked. I screamed. I spat. I fought with everything I had, but its powerful grip only dug in harder, more painfully like talons. I felt myself dragged, writhing from my chair, my heels scraping across the floorboards as it hauled me across the cabin floor. Rowan, stop it. It's me, Ace. Suddenly, it was just a voice, a human voice, barking at me over and over as I was hauled down the creaking steps and into the dirt. Ace's lanky silhouette leaned over me, their face flushed as they panted with exertion. Gasping, I blinked up at my sibling. The sun was so low in the sky that the stars shone through the skeletal branches. Ace, I groaned. Yes, thank fuck, gasped Ace, dropping down into the dirt beside me. Oh, thank fuck. I think you broke my nose. What happened? What happened? Hell if I know. Why were you sitting in there holding hands with rotting corpses? Corpses? I whirled to look back at the cabin. We were in the dirt, just below the front steps. The door hung open. Inside was dark, but the smell that wafted out made my stomach buck. Ace snatched my arm and pulled me toward the trees. Let's get the fuck away. I jerked back instinctively, but Emily, I said. I was too confused to do much more than cast a quick look behind me as my sibling tugged me into the pines. The cabin looked even more dilapidated than I remembered, the window panes cracked and missing and the roof sagging like it was about to collapse. Through the darkness of the open door, I could make out vague shapes, still and solemn, positioned around the table. And then Ace was pulling us into the bramble. I asked why we didn't take the path back down, and my older sibling snapped. There's no path. I was barely able to find her markers. It felt like I was lost between dream and wakefulness, in some strange limbo, while Ace shined their phone flashlight around, trying desperately to catch the beam on the occasional blue tape wound round branches or on piles of stones or pieces of clothing tied around trees. Apparently Ace had supplemented my trail with their socks, a headband, and other items from their pack. Even so, it was harrowing trying to find our way through the darkening twilight. We reached the campsite just as pitch black descended. Are the police coming? I asked. No, Ace still had hold of my hand, as if afraid to let go. I didn't get very far before I decided I'd rather die being stupid with you than go for help and risk losing you. Oh, so there were no authorities coming to look for us. We built a small fire and huddled together to wait for dawn while Ace told me slowly, haltingly, what they'd seen. They followed my blue tape trail to the cabin and found me sitting at the table, eyes squeezed shut. While I didn't react to my name being called, they noticed the family appeared to have simply died sitting around the table holding hands. And I was holding their hands, too. It freaked them out. Then they saw one of the family had no eyes, that the eyes had been wrenched out and one of the eyeballs was held in the free hand. The man had apparently plucked out his own eyes. Between this and the reek of decomposition, Ace rushed out and threw up. When they finally stopped being sick and came back inside to get me, I came bursting out past them and ran, and they chased me around the cabin 2 or 3 times before they found me sitting back in the chair holding hands again. That's when they grabbed me, and I punched them in the nose. Oh, I said quietly, and then, dreading the answer, did you see anything on the table? Ace was silent for a long time before grunting. Something about when the last chair is filled. And it was freaky as shit, because all the chairs were filled except the last one. A strange laugh bubbled in their throat. You know, I almost felt like sitting down. Weird impulse. Thank God you didn't, I thought. It was Ace's total lack of imagination, their dismissal of that thought as nonsensical, that probably saved them and me. We waited until the sky turned gray, and then we finally staggered to our feet and found our way to the deer trail and back to civilization, where we reported our finding of the missing family. But the family is still missing. The authorities got as far as the campsite before being unable to follow our markers. They're all still there, their spirits trapped within that cabin, nailed for eternity, for as long as their souls will have to wait, waiting for me to bring help. I'm sure I could find my way, but I'm too afraid. I don't know what happens if that last chair is filled. I know something will change, but the thought of it happening fills me with the deepest, most terrible dread. If I tell you where to look, will you go and save Emily? You wouldn't be stuck forever, I don't think. When the last chair is filled, you will be free. https://www.reddit.com/r/1nxwz3/welcome_thanks_for_stopping_by. Story 3. I had recently picked up a job as Chief Security Officer at a software development company. They didn't have much use for cybersecurity personnel at that point, as most security affairs were taken care of by artificial intelligence. But I was present for almost anything that involved the company's simulation servers, just as a last resort. Basically, I was there to make sure the AI didn't bug out. One day, we were working on a new physics engine. This engine was honestly mind-blowing. It could simulate hundreds of factors at once. For example, just walking or running in a game, this engine understood the slight alterations in speed depending on the gravity, torque, momentum, friction, and even the way vibrations would travel through the skeleton upon exerting force into the ground. It used these factors, combined with the muscle mass, height, bone density, and age of the character walking, to create an almost indistinguishable from reality simulation of walking. All of this built from the atomic level up. And it didn't stop with walking. We were working on a specific simulation so we could roll out the engine to sports games. I remember it so distinctly. It was just a man hitting a baseball. We were using a combination of AI and engineers, watching different scans, audio and video recordings of real-life baseball, attempting to isolate all of the different variables. There were some easy ones: the strength, the angle, the wind. But even with these variables stagnant, the ball was never landing in the same exact place twice. Finally, we thought we had found the culprit. There were slight atomic variations when it came to the angle. It was seemingly impossible for a batter to hit a ball the exact same way twice, even if it appeared as if they did to the naked eye. After realizing this and tweaking everything accordingly, it still didn't work. We realized shortly after that the way we were generating the baseball was important as well, as no two baseballs are exactly the same. We had some slight variations in the material makeup of the balls to keep it more realistic when playing a game, but for the purpose of this simulation, we needed every ball to be microscopically identical. Identical balls, bats, identical atomic angles. Now, finally we could run the simulation. And it worked. The batter would hit the ball 101.3 m away from home plate. The ball would bounce twice and land with the logo facing up. Every single time. Sitting from a back and watching the simulation take place, something came into my mind. A stupid question, really. I decided to ask one of the engineers, someone who had been friendly with me since I started working here. Hey man, so we know all of these variables, probably hundreds of data points by now, that cause the ball to land in this exact position, right? I mean, yeah, that's the whole point. He replied, looking up from his monitor. So, what if we just had the ball? I asked, realizing how silly it might have sounded. That it wouldn't go anywhere. He said, looking back down at his monitor. No, I mean, look, imagine the ball has already been hit. And we don't have access to the ball being hit. Just where it landed. Could we, predict, or I guess figure out exactly what all those variables were that allowed the ball to land exactly where it was and how it landed? Oh, yeah, said the engineer, now with some mild interest. Yeah, we probably could. We just have to reverse the process. Run a bunch of simulations until we figure it out. I don't know how useful that would be for the engine, though. Maybe not for the engine. But what if we trained it on, I don't know, a boat that sank to the bottom of the ocean? Could the engine, figure out how, when, and why the boat sank, where it was, etc.? I asked, realizing the absurdity of my hypothesis, but unable to figure out why it wouldn't work. If we think about it, the ball being thrown has maybe 100 variables, and the boat sinking maybe has 10,000, but we already know how powerful this engine is. I don't know, no, you're right. The engineer cut me off. We would just need to train enough on real-world physics. How it all interacts. Radio and sonar scans, videos, everything we can get. It's way too big a job for us engineers, but I bet the AI could do it. I just don't see a reason they would sink that much money into it right now. Thinking about all of this, I had a thought, one that was so absurd, but again, I couldn't understand why it wouldn't work. Tell me, why wouldn't we be able to? Train on a person? If it's all just atoms moving around, bumping into each other. That's all everything is really at its core. And our engine already knows how to simulate physics on an atomic level. It should, theoretically, be able to figure out why a person is the way that they are physically and in terms of personality just by observing them at the present moment. If we could figure out the path of a baseball or a boat, then why not a person? There's only one distinct path they could have taken to be exactly the way they are right now. What if we could simulate exactly what that path must be? I paused for a minute. I knew what I was about to say sounded crazy. It would basically be time travel, wouldn't it? Time travel? Well, I don't know about, no, yeah, you're right. It would be. With enough power, we could map out a person's past. Well, theoretically, I think we could map out everyone's past. Just from a small group of people, or maybe even one. A person should have a complex enough backstory, enough interactions that depend on other interactions that must have taken place exactly how they did for the person to take this distinct path. Enough specific interactions that we could just scan one person and get everyone's whole lives, our whole lives, in a simulation. Now that's a monetary incentive to get the higher-ups on board. From one person? That didn't make sense to me. But then it hit. What if we mapped out the path of the baseball, but didn't stop at the baseball being hit by the bat? We could gather data on the intensity of the pitch, the state of the bat, the wind, the climate, the crowd. With this data, we could figure out a rough estimate of the build of the batter and the pitcher. We could figure out where it's taking place. Now imagine if we had 1,000,000 more variables. A person instead of a baseball. We could get so much information about so much more. Bewildered at the chain of thoughts I'd sparked, unaware of what would come of it, I said not just our lives, but the whole fucking universe since the beginning of time. Story 4. I had to put up blackout curtains in my bedroom. The old ones wouldn't quite go all the way to the edge of the window, and you could see into parts of the room around them. At first I taped them so that there were no gaps, but if anyone came over, that would make me look insane. It's occurred to me that I might be insane, but overall my life isn't that bad. The only reason I'm writing this is to see if it's happened to anyone else. There are 2 rules that I have to follow, and other than that, things are okay. 1. I can't be outside at night. Ever. For that reason, I never drive anywhere that I couldn't walk home before dark if my car died or something. My work is about a mile from my house. I always go to the same grocery store. There are a few nice walks within a couple of miles. Travel is hard, but if I get flights early in the day, I could go see my parents or go to weddings or whatever. 2. I can't be within 3 feet of a window at night. Rather than putting tape on the floor or something equally psychotic, I just have tables or other furniture that keeps me from getting too close. I have my bed on the opposite side of the room, and if I'm feeling extra anxious, I have a child gate that fits into the window behind the curtain. For some reason, knowing that the curtain couldn't go anywhere is comforting. If I put on headphones with white noise, that helps too. Following those 2 rules, I can live a pretty normal life. I have to admit, not being able to go anywhere after the sun goes down has made me appreciate the mornings, and my sleep schedule is the best it's ever been. The one thing that I miss the most is seeing the stars, but I don't think I will again. The first time it happened, I was 35, solo camping in Glacier National Park. There were plenty of other people at the campground, but I was in my own spot in a nice forested area. My site was the last one on the road, near the lake and a little isolated. At the time, I was very happy to have gotten it. It was spring, and the park had just opened to cars. There weren't really many mosquitoes yet, so I was just outside my tent, looking at the stars, drinking a beer. Lake McDonald was close to the campsite, and I had heard there could be northern lights, so I went out to the lakeshore, carrying a camping chair and wearing my unzipped sleeping bag like a shawl. The stars were brilliant, and I could see the Milky Way stretching over the dark outlines of pointed mountains. There was no moon, but you could make your way across the gravelly shore by starlight. I'd never experienced anything like it, even though I'd been stargazing a few times. Pulling a beer from my six-pack, I sat down in my chair and stared up at the sky. It was around 11 p.m., which is usually when the aurora starts getting good. It was beautiful, although faint. Gentle green and purple lines over the mountains, reflecting on the still water. Wrapped in a sleeping bag, I actually dozed off, exhausted from hiking all day. That was when it woke me up. The northern lights were brighter, like you see in pictures. As stunning as it was, I only felt fear. Frozen in the chair, I looked up at the sky, as if something was going to come out of it. There was nothing there. In the middle of the bright stars, surrounded by the aurora, there was a little hole, a space that was completely black. It didn't have sharp edges, but everything faded toward the center of it, leaving nothingness. Goosebumps went across my scalp, and I held perfectly still, hoping that it wouldn't notice me. It sounds ridiculous to say it like that. I know. Why would a dark spot in the sky notice me, or be sentient at all? Maybe it isn't. I can't really say. That was just how I felt. When the sound started, the pang of fear that went across my body actually hurt, as all of my muscles tensed up and I felt a panic which had only existed in childhood nightmares. It was deafening, a low sound that oscillated, kind of a wub-wub-wub noise. It felt like it went through my bones, and even terrified, I looked at the gravel around my feet and saw it shaking. I threw my sleeping bag to the ground, knocking over the chair as I started to run. I ran back to the campground, which still had some lights on. There were other people there, a flashlight or two. I saw the light on the bathrooms and sprinted toward it instinctively. Throwing the door open, I ran into the back corner and curled into a ball, arms around my knees. The sound was gone, but I couldn't make myself get up. I sat in the fluorescent lights, curled on the floor. After maybe half an hour, a guy came in to brush his teeth. He saw me on the floor and asked if I was okay. I asked him if he'd heard a loud noise, a loud, low noise. He said he hadn't and asked if I was okay again. I knew I looked crazy, so I said that I was feeling sick and just wanted to stay close to the toilet. I'm sure he thought I was on drugs. He brushed his teeth and left without saying anything else. After another hour or so, the concrete floor was getting uncomfortable. I thought that the whole thing must have been in my head. It made total sense. I was asleep, had a nightmare, and freaked out. I was still asleep for the sand moving part, but didn't realize it. If it had been real, everyone would have heard it. Washing my face in the sink with cold water, I was awake. Looking in the mirror, I actually laughed, thinking about how silly I had acted. When I opened the door and stepped back out onto the night sky, there was a tension in the air like when you're close to a big power line. With the outside light next to me, I couldn't make out any stars or see the dark spot. But I knew it was there. The noise started to come back, a crescendo rumbling up from silence, and I looked to the sky. The light on the side of the stucco building was right next to me, preventing me from seeing anything past the eaves, but I knew I wasn't dreaming it. There were moths around the light, and they all fell to the ground. I still had my hand on the open door. That was how fast it had happened. I darted back inside, breathing hard, running only 15 feet back to my spot against the wall. The sound went away. I spent the night there. A few people came and went, awkwardly ignoring me or asking if they could help. I said the same thing, that my stomach was just upset and I wanted to be near the toilet. It was the best I could think of. Once the sun came up, a bunch of people started coming in. Both stalls were occupied, and the sinks had 1 or 2 people at each. In the bright morning, with birds singing and cars running and people laughing, it seemed safe. I opened the door. There was no sound, no hole in the sky. I had 2 more nights, but left early. When I got back to my house in the afternoon, I just played video games all day. I didn't tell anyone I'd come home early, because then they might ask why, and I didn't want to talk about it or think about it or admit that it had happened. I had no desire to go outside. I closed all of the blinds when the sun was setting and just drank and watched shows until about 1 a.m. When I went to bed, I had a hard time sleeping, but eventually did. The next day, I went to the grocery store. I was a bit tentative opening my door, but things were fine. It was a beautiful day. Everything was green after about 6 months of winter, and I was feeling pretty good. It wasn't until the sun went down that it came back. I was on my couch, next to the window, which was open. As the street lights flickered on and it grew dark, I felt uneasy. Just a little tickle of fear, like you would have as a kid, imagining that something was under your bed. Over my left shoulder, the sky loomed through the window, and I couldn't help myself. I looked out, putting my head close to the glass to look up at the dark sky. That powerful humming came back. The glass began to shake, and I recoiled, throwing myself to the far side of the couch, then pulling my legs in as if something would break through the window and grab them. But nothing did. The humming faded away. I spent the night on cushions and blankets on my bathroom floor with the door closed. It's the only room in my apartment with no windows. It had followed me. I still wonder why every night. During the day, I do fine and don't even think about it most of the time. It's just a part of life, like checking for cars before you cross the street. There was only one other night, a few months later, where I even got close to a window. I had been drinking a lot. As scared as I was, I managed to get angry. It wasn't fair that this was happening to me, and whatever it was could just kill me or fuck off, as far as I was concerned. I'd left the living room window open and gathered up my courage before walking up to it. The sound came. I gritted my teeth, said I would stand my ground no matter what. But it got louder, and louder, and louder, that wub, 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 drilling into my brain, causing a fear like I never knew a sound could. I fell back, crawling away from the window, from the black night sky, until it disappeared. I sobbed after that. Sometimes, I still cry when I think about it. Not knowing is the worst part. Having no idea what it is, why it wants me. Maybe I'm crazy. I'm considering it a therapy, even though I really don't believe that it could help. But I have no doubt that if anyone else has heard it, they will know what I'm talking about immediately. So now, at risk of sounding insane, I'll ask, has anyone else heard it? More. https://www.reddit.com/r/Patrick Mullins author /comments/1kern3 /Patrick_Mullins_ring_work. Story 5. Once in the heart of Pennsylvania, there was a town. A small, humble place that time, with all its wiles and whims, time had mercifully forgotten. It was a place where hope was a shared belonging, where children had futures, parents had security, and everyone knew each other's names. The main street ran through the heart of the town like a life-giving river, connecting the antique shops, brick houses, and quiet diners together like tranquil streams. The bells of the church rang with a solemn peace that filled the hearts of those who heard. The bakery opened at 5 a.m. sharp, and the postman waved hello to the shopkeeper at noon every day, like clockwork. I myself have been happy here in my 32 years of life. I grew up here and was content to die here when my time had come. This place felt like home to me. The very ivy that caressed the red brick walls of the houses in my neighborhood had latched themselves onto my soul and rooted my being here. My father, like his father and his before, was the proud owner of the town's little bookshop, half bookstore, half antique store, smelling of cedar and dust and stories yet unread. It was his pride and joy, and when he passed, it was mine too. Ironic that the place that gave me the most joy, felt the most like home, would be the birthplace of the destruction of all I loved. I can tell you exactly when it started. On a drizzly afternoon, I took my place behind the counter of my beloved shop like I had so many days before. It stood out to me like a spotlight, obscene in its presence, as if the world itself was forcing my eyes to see it. That awful book, bound in the skin of a serpent. I knew every page of every book in that store, every crease and every fold. Not one had entered or exited these walls without my knowledge. And yet I didn't know this one. In my curiosity, I made my fatal error. And like Adam, My blunder, born from an innocent curiosity, would damn the souls of many. The first act was no more than strange. Beautiful, but strange in a way that sickened me to my core, like watching an explosion. I was seeing something I was never meant to, and I knew it. Yet I yearned to read on. I flipped the small plastic sign that hung on the door closed. I had never done that before, and I didn't know why I was doing it now, but I needed to. I spent the rest of that day tearing over the second act. It was unlike the first, unlike anything I had ever read before. I trembled with fear, and the blood left my face. I was cold, feverish, but I didn't stop until it was done. When I finished, I returned that beautiful abomination to its place on the shelf and went home, where I fell into a deep sleep. That night, under a crescent moon, the wind blew wrong. It carried no scent of pine or chimney smoke. The lively breath of the nature that surrounded the town, tonight, was a sickly gasp. It bestowed its pestilence to us all. My dream lasted a mere moment and an eternity. I saw the lake of clouds, ever encroaching on the ruins of that great and terrible city, and the sibling suns that it swallowed whole. I witnessed the towers that hid behind the moons, and the black stars that voided out the sky. Worst and greatest of all, I saw his ivory visage. And in that moment, I knew, one day I would never leave this place. But I never could have imagined how. I was filled with an awesome dread, a sick amazement. How could something be so horrible and so wonderful at once? When I woke, the feeling hadn't left me. It was more than I could bear, leaving me bedridden for 3 days. When again I could will myself back into life, back into the world outside, it wasn't the same as I'd left it. I observed the town around me. The faces I knew were all there. The smiles of my friends and neighbors all exactly as I remembered them. Only, they weren't. They were pale like porcelain and gaunt like the grave. The books of the children that ran by were stamped with his sallow crest. The necklaces worn by the women bore it on pendants, golden and gleaming. The men muttered to me as I passed, low, reverent words. Awful, beautiful syllables I yet recognized. It didn't take long for us to be taken. Once his word had spread throughout the town, it was too late. The bearer of that pallid facade owns this place now, and all those in it. I don't know how long it's been. Time has stretched like the shadows of the towers that now shroud us. The town I knew is with him now, as are we. People don't act as they once did. There are no more friendly greetings or smiling faces. In their place has fallen the same sickness. Lunacy and death have become our life. His mad sickness has come over us like a plague, incurable and all-consuming. The main street, once the life of our small, quaint town, now points to the spires reverently. Many of the brick walls have taken a new shade of red, repainted by the blood of their residents. The church did not come with us. It's the last thing that gives me any hope or joy, the thought that those beautiful bells are still ringing in that place, so far away from here. It is a place where madness is a shared belonging. Those left tremble at his presence, some in fear, others even in joyful obedience. Their faces are an uncanny imitation of his visor, ghost-like in their complexion. Once in the heart of Pennsylvania, there was a town, but that place is gone now. As for me, he has a purpose. It's why you're reading this now. He's allowed me to send this back, a final message to my home from me and an invitation from him. Or perhaps, rather, a warning. I don't think he asks. The yellow sign is a binding seal. If you've read this far, I'm sure I will one day meet you. And together, we'll wander the ruins of the great city for eternity, sprayed by the icy wind of the cloudy lake, beneath the black stars that drink the sky. Story 6. There's one in every family. Ours shows up each Thanksgiving. Polka hut, worn shirt, faded jeans. We get to listen to his diatribes about the economy, the fake moon landing, and how Big Brother is trying to kill us with weather manipulation. It's not natural, he says, clutching a turkey drumstick. Those white streaks in the sky. It's population control. Someone's out to do something about it. Typically, these conversations only last a few minutes. My family has learned the art of distracting him with questions like, so, Uncle Hank, how's the new boat? Are you enjoying retirement? Did you get your hip looked at? But this last time, several Thanksgivings ago, it got really bad. Uncle Hank had a little too much to drink, got on one of his rampages, and wouldn't stop. The government's cooking up another virus. He shouted, "It'll make Ebola look like the flu. It'll go airborne and wipe out 70% of the population. We gotta rise up." His tirade started to make Grandma sob. She had just lost Grandpa and was still processing her grief. Dad shifted in his seat, pissed, then leapt up. "Enough," he said, and escorted Uncle Hank out of the room. "Listen, I am sorry, Hank apologized." But Dad let him outside and slammed the door. I didn't see much of him after that. But then, a few years later, my girlfriend, Vanessa, and I had to drive south to tour her new university. She had just been accepted to a master's program and wanted to check out the campus. I was so proud. We were navigating an isolated road when our GPS stopped working. Before long, our car ended up in the middle of a forested back road, surrounded by darkness. "See anything?" Vanessa asked, checking for road signs. "No," I said, craning my eyes. The sunlight was vanishing. Then the car shuddered. Violently. "Shit." I pulled over and parked. Smoke billowed out from the hood as Vanessa and I got out. It was so cold the air clung to our skin. We pulled our jackets close. I didn't have a flashlight, so Vanessa held her phone over me as I peered under the hood. I couldn't see what was wrong. I called the tow truck company. They told me they couldn't be there until the next day. Damn. I turned to Vanessa, cold air biting my skin. "Looks like we're stuck here for the night." She buried her hands in her pockets, shivering. "Do you know anyone here?" I frowned as I thought, yeah, I know someone. I made the call. It was about an hour later when Uncle Hank's truck appeared down the road. He pulled up behind my car and stepped out, wearing his signature cowboy boots. "Wee wee." Uncle Hank whistled. "What do we got here?" "Hi, Uncle Hank." I offered my hand to shake his, but he just gave me a big, bear hug. You know, the kind that feels like your ribs are about to break. Then he turned to Vanessa. "Who's this?" "Vanessa," she said and shook his hand. "Thanks for saving us." "My pleasure. It's what anyone would do for family." Hank turned and peered inside my vehicle. He couldn't figure out what was wrong either. "Well, looks like the mechanic will have to sort this out." He dusted off his hands on his pants. "Why don't you stay over at my place? I'll drive you to the shop in the morning." "That'd be great, Uncle Hank." Vanessa and I got our bags, left the keys in my car, climbed into Uncle Hank's truck, and drove off. We were in the cab for about 5 minutes when Uncle Hank cleared his throat. "So where do you two meet?" "University," I said. "Oh." He leaned over, made eye contact with Vanessa. "Universities are for brainwashing. Lizard people use them as tools for indoctrination." "Lizard people?" she said. "They rule the world." She just nodded. I could tell she was uncomfortable. Best way to tell a lizard person is to, "So, Uncle Hank," I piped in, "how's your boat running?" "Oh, that old thing," he thought. "Boat's fine, but the damn thing keeps breaking down." Just last weekend, I smiled and relaxed, satisfied my question had diverted him. About 30 minutes later, we were at his place. It was a small, squat building in the back end of nowhere. There wasn't another house for miles. "Come on in," he said and held the door open for us. "Don't break anything or I'll murder you." Vanessa and I looked at each other, disturbed by his off-putting joke. "Just kidding," he said and pointed to a room down the hall. "You lovebirds can take the guest room." He signaled to another. "There's the bathroom. Master bedroom's around the corner. If you hear any strange noises, don't come looking for me." Vanessa and I looked at each other. "What?" "I'll let you two get unpacked. Good night." He disappeared around the corner as I helped Vanessa move our bags to the guest room. A few minutes later, Vanessa went to the bathroom to get ready for bed. I stored our stuff in the closet, and Uncle Hank popped in. "PSSSD, Tommy." "Yes, Uncle Hank." "Your girlfriend. Is she a flat earther?" "A what?" "Flat earther. Like, does she believe the earth is round, or—" He made a horizontal motion with his hands. I thought the question was strange, but I humored him. "I don't know, Uncle Hank. I'll have to ask her." "Please do." He just stood there, looking at me. I prayed the awkward moment would pass, but it kept going. Finally, the sound of cascading water hit our ears. Vanessa must have started the shower. "Well, I better hit the hay." Uncle Hank rapped his knuckles on the door. "You lovebirds get some sleep. And remember, You hear any strange noises, don't come knocking. The repeated comment creeped me out, but I shrugged it off. It was one night. How bad could it be? Okay, Uncle Hank. He wandered into the hall. Footsteps pattering. I heard a door close, and thanked God he was gone. A few hours later, I flopped into bed next to Vanessa, both dressed and ready for sleep. I held her hand as I drifted off. Later that night, God only knows when, I felt someone stir me awake. It was Vanessa. Tom, what? I sat up and rubbed the grogginess from my eyes. It's your uncle. I heard a loud moan come from the hall. Desperate, pleading, like someone was having a violent seizure. I sat up and listened. Another agonizing squeal erupted from his bedroom, like a person was being eaten alive. What the hell is that? Vanessa said. I don't know. I scrambled up and went to the door. Another painful groan. Is your uncle okay? I'm sure he is. It sounds like he's dying. The screams grew louder. Then a gasp of pain. Almost just so be like. Oh my God, Tom, do something. He told us to leave him alone. Just make sure he's all right. The groans turned into a series of belly-wrenching screams. I ventured out of the room. Oh God, help me. Help. It was Uncle Hank, wailing in misery. I raced to his bedroom door, pounded on it. Uncle Hank, what's going on in there? Another loud scream. I twisted the knob. It was locked. God, no. Help me. Ah, his voice sounded shell-shocked, entreating. I'm coming in. I backed up and slammed my shoulder into the door. Bang. Then again. Bang. Help me. Ah, finally I broke through. Uncle Hank's bedroom was dark except for a sliver of moonlight peering through the window. Hank was sitting on the edge of his bed, gasping, and something small, no bigger than a bulldog, was sitting on his shoulders, whispering into his ears. No, please. I can't take any more, Hank begged. The shape's voice sounded eerie and soft, almost seductive, but I couldn't tell what it was saying. Please, no more. I crept back, trying to rationalize the situation. Your lies hurt so much, then my voice slipped out of my throat. It must have been a gut reaction to all the insanity. As soon as the words came, I wanted to pull them back in. Uncle Hank, are you all right? Uncle Hank turned. His voice was cold, menacing. I told you not to come in. I'm sorry. He leapt off his bed, dashing toward me. I tried getting away, but he grabbed my arm, slapped his sweaty palm over my lips, pinned me against the wall. I squirmed, trying to break free, but his grip was strong. Uncle Hank leaned in close, his breath hot against my face. You should have listened to me, Tommy. I nodded, begging to be let go. The weird shape was still atop his shoulders, whispering. It was so dark I couldn't tell what it was, but it had glowing yellow eyes, and the smell, I can't even describe it. You must not tell anyone what you've seen, Uncle Hank said. I was so scared. What was even happening? I just nodded, sweat pouring down my face. Uncle Hank removed his hand and backed away. Go to bed, Tommy. I bobbed my head, stumbled back into the hall, my mind swirling. I staggered to our bedroom, leapt inside, shut the door. Vanessa just stared at me from the bed, white-knuckling her comforter. What happened? I don't know. Seriously, Tom, what was it? I don't know. Is he all right? I can't tell you. I just flopped in bed, silent, not wanting to make any more noise. Why won't you tell me? Trust me. I can't. Vanessa frowned and turned away. I sank back into my sheets, delirious, hoping to disappear. Needless to say, I didn't sleep much that night. Next morning, I could hear Uncle Hank whistling through the house, getting ready for the day. 5 minutes later, he knocked on our door. You kids want something to eat? Vanessa and I had just finished packing. We were both dressed and ready to go. No thanks. All right, come on out when you're ready and I'll drive you over. Not long after, Uncle Hank had shuttled us to the shop. We got to our car, told the mechanic about our problems. Case closed. Uncle Hank pulled me aside after I had finished talking with the mechanic. Now listen, Tommy, about last night. It's okay. We don't need to talk about it. No. I need to apologize. You see, I've got this cat. A cat. Sometimes when I get scared, it comes to me and sits on my shoulder. It tells me things to comfort me. I just stood there, not knowing what to say. Last night, it was telling me about my past. Uncle Hank's voice drifted away as my mind blocked out his words. Anyway, he slapped a hand on my shoulder, reassuring me. I'm sorry for overreacting. Let's keep this between us, all right? Okay, Uncle Hank. He hiked back to his truck, waving goodbye to Vanessa. Take care of my nephew. Will do. She waved, grateful to see him going. Uncle Hank got his truck, backed out, and merged onto the road. Vanessa frowned. You're still not going to tell me what happened? I just shrugged. How could I? I didn't even know what had happened. My eyes glanced back to Uncle Hank's truck as it shrank in the distance. In the rear window, I could barely notice a small, bulldog-sized creature perched upon his shoulders, its yellow eyes focused on me. I had no idea what it was, but I knew it sure as hell wasn't a cat. That's it for today's creepy Reddit tales. Before we go, I just want to say a quick thanks to all of you for watching, liking, and sticking around. You guys keep this channel going, and I'll be back soon with more stories that'll make your skin crawl. Drop a comment if you've got your own spooky tale to share, and I'll see you in the next one.